As the pulsating race to enter the 9th Parliament kicks off in earnest, the opposition face a tall order to extricate themselves from a dismal performance in the last election. Political observers are arguing that if the opposition is to offer a meaningful alternative in the House, it has to sharply increase its numbers of lawmakers.
If we would have substantial numbers of opposition in Parliament, it would keep the government or the ruling party on its toes. But if the numbers are substantially very few, then the ruling government might rule with impunity and it may not be responsive to the people's demands.
I think the best thing the opposition should have done is really to go the grassroots and ensure that they get as many members of parliament as possible, and that would help them to get a strong say in parliament.
If you go to the parliament and rate departments, you'll discover that the department headed by the opposition, the PAC, has been the most pronounced. It's very much relevant. The problem in this country is that the state, the executive, and the parliament sometimes are not distinguished.
Despite a widely held view that several ruling party lawmakers could be just turned out of parliament by the electorate, it's still not clear whether the opposition could ride on the tide of voter discontent to undercut the NRM support. According to the latest opinion poll by the Afrobarometer, it's still illusory for the opposition to stop the NRM juggernaut in the 9th Parliament. The poll conducted between 16th November and 6th December shows that if parliamentary elections were held today, the NRM could win by an overwhelming 62%. The NRM remains more entrenched at the grassroots, using state structures as a result of what a political historian refers to as lack of organizational structures at the grassroots by the opposition.
There are two factors that determine electoral outcomes. One is organizational, and two, it is political. Whereas the opposition has got political factors in their favor, the organizational factors are against them.
Of course, they will always cry for and say the police and other security agencies sometimes were disturbing them when they were creating the branches and so on. But I think the opposition did not put in all that effort that was necessary to create grassroots structures.
What then happens next if the NRM is elected with a large majority in a House recently berated by its own prodigy, Aru County MP Odonga Oto, in his book Theories and Practice of Democracy? From the hope that full multi-party politics will prevail in the country to the gaffe that President Museveni was to retire after serving 2001-2005 term. And for the men and women serving as lawmakers, be it from the ruling NRM or the opposition, they have been victims at some point, the author continues to suggest.
I raised an issue that members of parliament were receiving bribes. I mentioned their names. Instead, I was dragged to a disciplinary committee. So I go ahead to criticize the institution I work for, to say much as we should fight corruption, some of us, our hands are not clean.
The previous parliament, if I'm to rate it, was the poorest, the less performing parliament Uganda has ever had. The previous one before this one created a scenario where they removed the term limit. If you have read Odonga Oto's book, you would understand the inside of parliament. The whole of it is an institution that is not performing.
That unless the politicians in this country, and more so those who will be in power, shape up, we are not practicing democracy, whereby when you have the majority, you just become a rubber stamp, you just become just sycophants, and you just come in to support what the executive has agreed upon.
A political scholar attributes the gutter politics in parliament to a belief that being a lawmaker is a source of employment. Therefore, self-aggrandizement and amassing wealth overrides articulating interests of the poor electorate annexed by the social barbed wire, he argues.
All members of parliament should really observe their conscience and at one time put their foot down and say, let me stand for principles, let me stand for nation building, let me be a statesman. Short of that, this opportunism that we have seen in the last parliament, if it continues, then this country is heading for trouble.
People now coming to parliament to get money. Ideally, in most countries, a parliament is not a place for a job, for getting a job. A parliament is a place where you go with a conviction that you want to change this, or you want to influence this, or do this.
Pundits say the opposition could seize the opportunity of NRM's apparent rift within the party hierarchy and quote independent candidates who feel alienated by the fractious NRM primaries polls. While the NRM grapples with the headache of independence, the opposition will struggle with the effects of the stillbirth in the IPC and the blunder of fielding many candidates in one constituency. It will likely take a meteoric rise of opposition lawmakers to change the status quo and match the NRM in numbers in the House. With a sense of apprehension about the quality of MPs who will make it to the 9th Parliament, it is likely the opposition will do much better in the upcoming election. However, pundits fear that the opposition may remain villains of their own destiny. Emam Taizibwa, NTV.